Lisa Chen had always been proud of her last name. Growing up as the daughter of Deputy Sheriff Robert Chen, she learned early that being part of a law enforcement family meant something special in their small California town. Her father had been walking the beat for over 20 years, and dinner conversations at their house usually revolved around his cases, his arrests, and his strong opinions about keeping their community safe. At 28, Lisa worked as a junior prosecutor in the district attorney's office of Riverside County. She had graduated from law school 3 years earlier, driven by the same sense of justice that had guided her father's career. But where her father dealt with criminals on the street, Lisa fought them in the courtroom. She specialized in drug cases and minor offenses, building a reputation for being tough and uncompromising. Her colleagues at the DA's office respected her work ethic, though some found her approach a bit intense. Lisa believed that being soft on crime, even small crimes, led to bigger problems down the road. This wasn't just professional philosophy for her, it was personal. She had grown up hearing her father's stories about drug dealers who started small and worked their way up, about criminals who took advantage of any sign of weakness in the system. Lisa's apartment was a 15-minute drive from the courthouse, located in a nice suburb where most of the other young professionals in town lived. Her neighbors were teachers, nurses, accountants, and other people who worked regular jobs and led quiet lives. It was the kind of neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked and kids rode bikes in the street without worry. This Tuesday, morning started like any other. Lisa's alarm went off at 6:30, just like every weekday. She showered, got dressed in one of her 3 courtroom suits, and grabbed a coffee and bagel for breakfast. She had 2 important cases to present that day, both involving drug possession charges. These were the kinds of cases that could make or break a young prosecutor's career, and Lisa had prepared thoroughly. Her car, a reliable Honda that had gotten her through law school, was parked in her assigned spot outside her apartment building. She had owned it for 5 years and rarely had problems with it, but when she turned the key that morning, nothing happened. She tried again, pumping the gas pedal and willing the engine to turn over. Still nothing. Lisa checked her watch. 7:45. Court started at 9, and she needed at least 30 minutes to review her notes before the first case was called. She popped the hood and stared at the engine, but she knew nothing about car repair. Her father had always handled mechanical problems at their house, and she had never bothered to learn the basics. She called a tow truck company, but they couldn't come out until after 10. She called her usual mechanic, but his shop didn't open until 8:30. Lisa felt her carefully planned morning falling apart, and with it, her confidence about the day ahead. Public transportation wasn't something Lisa used often. In fact, she couldn't remember the last time she had taken a bus anywhere. Her neighborhood had limited bus service, and most residents drove their own cars or used ride-sharing apps. But with time running short and her car clearly not going anywhere, she realized she had no choice. She looked up the bus routes on her phone and discovered that she would need to take 2 different buses to get to the courthouse on time. The first bus would take her to a transfer station in a part of town she rarely visited, and then she would catch a second bus that would drop her off 3 blocks from work. Lisa had driven through the transfer station area many times, but she had never actually walked around there or spent any time in the neighborhood. It was older than her suburb, with apartment buildings instead of single-family homes, and small businesses that catered to working-class families. The demographics were different too. While her neighborhood was mostly white and Asian families, this area was predominantly Black and Latino. She grabbed her briefcase and purse and hurried to the nearest bus stop. The first bus was already running 10 minutes late, which made her even more anxious about getting to court on time. When it finally arrived, she climbed aboard and found a seat near the front, clutching her belongings and checking her watch every few minutes. The ride to the transfer station took longer than she had expected. The bus stopped frequently, picking up passengers who seemed to know each other, and the driver. Lisa listened to their conversations about work schedules, family problems, and neighborhood news. It was a different world from her usual morning routine of driving alone with the radio. And when the bus reached the transfer station, Lisa got off and immediately felt out of place. She was dressed in her courtroom suit and heels, carrying an expensive briefcase and clearly unfamiliar with the area. The other people waiting for buses were mostly dressed for physical jobs or service work. Many were speaking Spanish or other languages she didn't recognize. The schedule board showed that her connecting bus was running 15 minutes late. Lisa found an empty bench and sat down, checking her phone for any messages from her office. She had texted her supervisor to let him know she might be a few minutes late, but she hadn't explained why. Admitting that her car had broken down and she was taking public transportation felt embarrassing somehow. As she waited, Lisa found herself observing the people around her with the same analytical eye she used in the courtroom. This was partly professional habit and partly personal discomfort. She had been trained to notice details, to spot inconsistencies, to identify potential problems before they became actual problems. Some of the other passengers were clearly heading to work, carrying lunch boxes and wearing uniforms. Others seemed less purposeful in their movements, hanging around the station without obviously waiting for any particular bus. Lisa's father had taught her to be alert in unfamiliar situations, to trust her instincts about people and places. The longer she waited, the more aware she became of feeling like an outsider. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the courthouse, probably from her supervisor wondering where she was. Her carefully prepared opening statements felt less sharp in her mind as stress and unfamiliar surroundings disrupted her usual pre-court routine. This was exactly the kind of morning that could throw off an entire day, and Lisa prided herself on being the kind of professional who never let external circumstances affect her performance. But sitting on that bench in that neighborhood waiting for a bus that was getting later by the minute, she felt her control over the situation slipping away. She had no idea that the next 30 minutes would change not just her day, but her entire understanding of justice, authority, and the assumptions she had carried throughout her career. Lisa checked her watch again. 8:35. Her connecting bus was now 20 minutes late, and she was getting more frustrated by the minute. The courthouse would be filling up with lawyers, defendants, and their families, all preparing for the day's cases. Her supervisor had probably noticed her empty chair by now. She was about to call for an expensive rideshare when she noticed a man sitting on the bench about 15 feet away from her. He appeared to be in his early 50s, well-dressed in a navy blue suit that looked expensive. His shoes were polished, and he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from years of professional success. What caught Lisa's attention first was how out of place he seemed in this particular neighborhood. Like her, he was clearly dressed for office work rather than the physical labor jobs that most people around here seemed to be heading to. But unlike her, he didn't look uncomfortable or anxious. He sat calmly, occasionally checking his phone or glancing at a manila folder filled with documents. The man was black, probably in his 50s, with gray at his temples and the bearing of someone used to being in charge. He spoke quietly into his phone, using the kind of measured tone that Lisa associated with courtroom lawyers or business executives. She couldn't make out most of his words, but she caught fragments that made her pay closer attention. "Yes, I reviewed the evidence last night," she heard him say. "The case files are concerning. We need to move quickly on this." Lisa's prosecutor instincts kicked in immediately. In her experience, people who talked about evidence and case files in public places were usually up to no good. Legitimate lawyers discussed their cases in offices, not at bus stops in neighborhoods like this. She had seen enough drug cases to know that dealers often used legal-sounding language to disguise their real business. The man continued his phone conversation, occasionally opening the manila folder and pointing to specific documents as he spoke. Lisa tried to get a better look at the papers, but she was too far away to see any details. What she could see was that he seemed very familiar with whatever was in that folder, like someone who had studied those documents carefully. "The witness statements are problematic," she heard him say. "Someone needs to interview these people again before we proceed." To Lisa, this sounded exactly like the kind of conversation a criminal might have while trying to intimidate witnesses or coordinate false testimony. She had prosecuted several cases where defendants had tried to influence witness statements, and the language was often similar. The fact that this conversation was happening in public, at a bus stop, made it even more suspicious. She pulled out her phone and pretended to check messages while actually trying to record some of what the man was saying. If he was involved in witness tampering, Having a recording could be valuable evidence, but the audio quality was poor because of traffic noise and other conversations around the bus station. The man's phone call continued for several more minutes. Lisa heard him mention investigations and prosecution strategies and department policies. Each phrase made her more convinced that she was witnessing some kind of criminal activity. In her experience, legitimate government officials didn't discuss sensitive matters at public bus stops. When the man finally ended his call, he remained seated on the bench, reviewing the documents in his folder. Lisa could see him making notes in the margins and occasionally shaking his head, as if he disagreed with something he was reading. His body language suggested someone who was deeply involved in whatever case those documents represented. Lisa made a decision that would change everything. She stood up from her bench and walked over to where the man was sitting. Her heart was beating faster than usual, but she felt the same surge of adrenaline that she experienced in the courtroom when she was about to make an important point. "Excuse me," she said in her most authoritative voice. "I need to speak with you." The man looked up from his documents with mild surprise. Up close, Lisa could see that he was even more professionally dressed than she had initially thought. His suit was definitely expensive, and his watch looked like something that cost more than her monthly salary. But these details didn't change her suspicions. She had learned from her father that criminals often dressed well to avoid attracting attention. "I'm a prosecutor with the district attorney's office," Lisa continued, pulling out her official identification card. "I've been observing your behavior and I have some questions." The man's expression didn't change much, but Lisa thought she detected a slight tightening around his eyes. In her experience, this was how guilty people reacted when they were caught off guard by law enforcement. "I see," the man said calmly. "And what exactly have you observed that concerns you?" His tone was polite, but not deferential. Most people became noticeably nervous when approached by prosecutors, especially in public settings. The fact that this man remained calm struck Lisa as another sign that he might be involved in criminal activity. Experienced criminals often knew how to maintain their composure when questioned by authorities. "I heard you discussing evidence, case files, and witness statements," Lisa said. "Those are very specific legal terms, and this is an unusual location for that kind of conversation." The man nodded slowly as if he was considering her words carefully. "You're absolutely right that those are legal terms. May I ask what specific crime you think I might be committing?" Lisa felt like he was trying to turn the tables on her, making her justify her suspicions instead of answering her questions. This was exactly the kind of deflection tactic that guilty defendants often used when they were caught in compromising situations. "Witness tampering is a serious federal offense," she said. "So is obstruction of justice. If you're involved in trying to influence witness testimony or interfere with ongoing investigations, you could be looking at significant prison time." The man's eyebrows rose slightly at this accusation, but he still didn't show the kind of panic or anger that Lisa expected. Instead, he seemed almost curious about her reasoning. "Those are indeed serious charges," he agreed. "But I'm curious about what led you to conclude that I'm involved in witness tampering. Have you seen me speak to any witnesses? Have you observed me making threats or offering bribes?" Lisa realized that her evidence was mostly circumstantial, but in her experience, circumstantial evidence was often enough to build a strong case. The combination of suspicious behavior, legal terminology, and an unusual location created a pattern that any reasonable prosecutor would find concerning. "You're discussing case details in a public place," she said. "You're reviewing what appear to be confidential documents where anyone could see them. And you're doing all of this in a neighborhood where you clearly don't belong." As soon as the last words left her mouth, Lisa realized they might have revealed more about her thinking than she intended. But she was committed to her position now, and she believed her instincts were sound. The man studied her face for a moment, and Lisa had the uncomfortable feeling that he was analyzing her just as carefully as she had been analyzing him. When he spoke again, his voice was still calm, but there was something different in his tone. "I see," he said quietly. "So your concern is based on my presence in this neighborhood, combined with professional conversations that you've overheard. Is That an accurate summary? Lisa felt like he was trying to trap her into saying something that could be used against her later. She had seen defense attorneys use similar tactics to make prosecutors look foolish or prejudiced. My concern is based on observable behavior that suggests possible criminal activity, she said firmly. And I have the authority to ask questions when I witness suspicious behavior. The man nodded again, but this time there was something that looked like sadness in his expression. He closed the manila folder and placed it carefully beside him on the bench. You certainly do have that authority, he said, though I think we might want to clarify exactly what authority you're exercising here, and under what circumstances. Before Lisa could respond, she heard the rumble of her bus approaching the station. She glanced over and saw that it was finally arriving, more than 25 minutes late. But now she was in the middle of what could be an important investigation, and she couldn't just walk away from a potential criminal case. She looked back at the man, who was watching her with an expression that she couldn't quite read. He seemed to be waiting for her to make the next move, as if he understood that this conversation was approaching a critical moment. Lisa made another decision that would prove to be even more significant than her first one. Instead of getting on the bus and going to court, she decided to stay and continue questioning this man until she got to the bottom of what he was really doing. The bus doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and several passengers climbed aboard. Lisa watched it happen from the corner of her eye, but she didn't move from her position in front of the man. She had made her choice. Whatever was happening here seemed more important than getting to court on time. I'm going to need to see some identification, she said, pulling out her phone. And I want to know exactly what's in that folder. The man looked at her with what she was starting to recognize as a very specific type of attention. It wasn't the nervous fear she usually saw from people she questioned, and it wasn't the angry defensiveness that guilty defendants often displayed. It was something else entirely, like he was studying her behavior for reasons she couldn't understand. May Tydrain, I ask under what authority you're demanding my identification, he said calmly. Are you conducting an official investigation? Have you witnessed a specific crime? Lisa felt like he was challenging her authority, which only strengthened her conviction that he was hiding something. Innocent people didn't ask detailed questions about legal procedures. They cooperated with law enforcement and tried to clear up any misunderstandings as quickly as possible. I'm a sworn prosecutor, she said, raising her voice slightly. I have the authority to investigate suspected criminal activity, and your behavior raises serious questions. Her louder tone attracted attention from other people waiting at the bus station. An elderly black woman sitting nearby looked over with obvious concern. Two younger men, who had been talking quietly, stopped their conversation and began watching the interaction. Lisa was aware of the growing audience, but she felt confident in her position. What specific behavior concerns you? The man asked, still maintaining his calm tone despite the increased attention. You were discussing case details and evidence in a public place, Lisa said. You're carrying what appear to be confidential legal documents, and when I approached you as a law enforcement official, you became evasive and started questioning my authority instead of cooperating. The elderly woman nearby stood up and walked closer to where they were sitting. Excuse me, she said to Lisa, but is there some kind of problem here? Lisa turned to address the woman, seeing an opportunity to gather additional information about the man's behavior. I'm conducting an official inquiry. Have you seen this man here before? Have you noticed him talking to people or acting suspiciously? The elderly woman looked confused by the question. Acting suspiciously? He's just been sitting there reading his papers and talking on the phone, same as anyone else. But have you seen him here before? Lisa pressed. Is he a regular in this neighborhood? Well, I don't know about regular, but I've seen him around. He's always very polite. The woman looked at the man with what seemed like recognition and respect. Are you in some kind of trouble? Lisa felt like the woman was being protective of a potential criminal, which wasn't uncommon in neighborhoods where residents distrusted law enforcement. She had seen this kind of community solidarity before in her cases, where witnesses would refuse to cooperate even when they knew someone was guilty. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but this is an official investigation, Lisa said, If you have information about this man's activities in the neighborhood, I need you to share it with me." The elderly woman's expression changed from confusion to something that looked like anger. Official investigation of what? This man sitting on a bench reading his papers? Before Lisa could respond, one of the younger men who had been watching the interaction walked over. He was tall and thin, probably in his 20s, wearing work clothes that suggested he was heading to a construction job or similar physical labor. "Hey, is everything okay here?" he asked, directing his question to the man in the suit rather than to Lisa. Lisa immediately felt like the situation was getting out of control. She was used to being the one asking questions and directing conversations, but now multiple people were getting involved and the focus was shifting away from her investigation. "This is a law enforcement matter," she said firmly to the young man. "I need you to step back and allow me to conduct my inquiry." The young man looked at her with obvious skepticism. "You're law enforcement? Where's your badge? Where's your police car?" Lisa pulled out her prosecutor's identification again, holding it up so both the young man and the elderly woman could see it. "I'm a prosecutor with the district attorney's office. I don't need a police car to investigate suspicious behavior." The man in the suit, who had been quietly observing this entire exchange, finally spoke up again. "Perhaps we should call the police to clarify the situation," he suggested. "If there's been some kind of misunderstanding, having an official police presence might help resolve it." Lisa felt a moment of uncertainty. Calling the police would certainly give her more authority in the situation, but it would also create an official record of what was happening. If she was wrong about her suspicions, having police involvement could make things complicated for her professionally. But if she was right, having backup would be essential. The man's suggestion to call police could be a bluff, counting on her, not wanting to escalate the situation. Guilty people often called bluffs like this, assuming that law enforcement officers wouldn't want to commit to official action without stronger evidence. "That's exactly what I'm going to do," Lisa said, pulling out her phone to dial 911. "I think having police here would be very helpful." As she made the call, more people began to gather around the bus stop. Word seemed to be spreading that something unusual was happening, and passengers who had been waiting quietly for their buses were now paying attention to the confrontation. Lisa spoke to the emergency dispatcher, identifying herself as a prosecutor, and requesting police assistance for a suspicious person investigation. She provided the location and a brief description of the situation, emphasizing that she had reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. While she was on the phone, she noticed that the man in the suit was also making a call. He spoke quietly, but she could hear enough to know that he was also asking someone to come to the bus station. This struck her as more evidence of guilt. If he was innocent, why would he need to call for backup? The elderly woman was now talking to several other people who had gathered around, explaining what she had witnessed. Lisa couldn't hear all of their conversation, but their body language suggested they were upset about how the man was being treated. "The police are on their way," Lisa announced when she finished her call. "I'm going to need everyone to stay calm and let them handle this situation properly." The man in the suit had also finished his phone call. He looked at Lisa with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout their entire interaction, but now there was something else in his eyes that she couldn't quite identify. "The police should be able to clear this up quickly," he agreed, "though I think you might be surprised by how this situation resolves." Lisa didn't like the confidence in his voice. In her experience, guilty people often became more arrogant when they thought they had found a way out of trouble. But she was confident in her position. She had witnessed suspicious behavior, she had attempted to investigate it properly, and she had called for official backup when the situation became complicated. The crowd around the bus stop was growing larger, and Lisa became aware that several people were holding up their phones, apparently recording the interaction. This made her slightly uncomfortable, but she reminded herself that she was acting in her official capacity as a prosecutor. Everything she was doing was legal and appropriate. She could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. Within a few minutes, she would have police backup and this entire situation would be resolved properly. The man would be properly identified, his documents would be examined, and if he was involved in criminal activity, he would be arrested. Lisa felt confident that she had handled the situation correctly from the beginning. She had noticed suspicious behavior, she had investigated it appropriately, and she had called for backup when needed. This was exactly how law enforcement was supposed to work. But as the sirens got louder and the crowd around them grew larger, Lisa had no idea that she was about to experience the most humiliating moment of her professional career. The man sitting calmly on the bench, still holding his manila folder of documents, was about to reveal something that would change her understanding of authority, justice, and her own place in the legal system. 3 police cars arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the morning air before falling silent as they pulled up to the bus station. Lisa felt a surge of relief and validation. This was how things were supposed to work. When prosecutors identified suspicious activity, police responded quickly to provide support and investigate properly. The first officer out of the lead car was Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran cop in his 40s who Lisa recognized from previous cases. Behind him came Officer Johnson, a younger woman who Lisa had worked with on several drug prosecutions. The third car held 2 officers she didn't know personally, but their professional demeanor suggested they were experienced. Lisa walked toward Sergeant Rodriguez, her prosecutor's badge visible in her hand. "Sergeant, thank you for responding so quickly. I've been questioning a suspicious individual who was discussing case details and evidence in a public setting. He's been evasive and uncooperative when I asked for identification." Sergeant Rodriguez nodded and looked over at the man still sitting calmly on the bench. But something strange happened with his expression. Instead of the professional focus Lisa expected, the sergeant's face went through a rapid series of changes. First confusion, then recognition, then what looked like shock. "Dr. Williams," Sergeant Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a tone of surprise and concern that Lisa didn't understand. The man on the bench looked up and smiled slightly. "Hello, Sergeant Rodriguez. I'm afraid there's been a bit of a misunderstanding here." Officer Johnson had also moved closer, and Lisa could see her face go pale when she got a clear look at the man. "Oh my God," Johnson whispered, just loud enough for Lisa to hear. Lisa looked back and forth between the officers and the man, trying to understand what was happening. "Do you know this individual?" she asked Sergeant Rodriguez. The sergeant looked at Lisa with an expression that seemed to combine sympathy and disbelief. "Ms. Chen, this is Dr. David Williams. He's the Attorney General of the state of California." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't process what she had just heard. The Attorney General was the top law enforcement official in the state, the person who oversaw all prosecution efforts, including the district attorney's office where she worked. He was essentially her boss's boss's boss. "That's impossible," Lisa said weakly. He was acting suspicious. He was discussing cases in public. He wouldn't show me identification." Dr. Williams stood up from the bench, still holding his manila folder. He moved with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect. And Lisa could suddenly see how his calm confidence throughout their interaction made perfect sense. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Williams said gently, "I was reviewing files for a civil rights investigation while waiting for my driver. The phone call you overheard was with the lead investigator on that case. As for identification, you never actually asked to see it. You demanded it, but when I asked under what authority, you became focused on other things." Lisa's mind raced back through their conversation, and she realized with growing horror that he was right. She had demanded identification but had never actually given him a chance to show it before moving on to other accusations. Sergeant Rodriguez was clearly trying to figure out how to handle the situation. "Dr. Williams, is there anything you need us to do here? Any charges you want to file?" Lisa felt her stomach drop. Charges? She was the one who was supposed to be investigating criminal activity, not facing charges herself. But as she thought about what had just happened, she realized that her behavior could potentially be seen as harassment or even false imprisonment. "I don't think charges will be necessary," Dr. Williams said thoughtfully. "But I would like to have a conversation with Ms. Chen about what happened here, and I think her supervisor should probably be involved." The crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation was still there, and Lisa became acutely aware that many of them were still recording with their phones. Her face felt hot with embarrassment and fear. Videos of this encounter would probably be online within hours, showing a junior prosecutor making false accusations against the state's top law enforcement official. Officer Johnson approached Lisa quietly. "You might want to call your supervisor," she suggested in a low voice. "This is going to need to be handled very carefully." Lisa nodded, but her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. How could she possibly explain this to her boss? How could she tell him that she had accused the Attorney General of criminal activity and called police to investigate him? Before she could make the call, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her supervisor's office number. News traveled fast in law enforcement circles, and someone had apparently already informed the district attorney's office about what was happening. "Lisa, where are you?" Her supervisor's voice was tense and urgent. "I just got a call from the Attorney General's office about some kind of incident. I'm at the bus station on Maple Street," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? I'm getting reports that you accused the Attorney General of witness tampering and called police to arrest him. Please tell me these reports are wrong." Lisa looked over at Dr. Williams, who was talking quietly with Sergeant Rodriguez. The elderly woman who had tried to defend him earlier was now standing near him, and Lisa could hear her saying something about how he was always respectful and polite when she saw him in the neighborhood. "The reports are basically accurate," Lisa admitted to her supervisor. "But I had reasonable suspicion based on his behavior and the conversation I overheard." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. When her supervisor spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Lisa, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't say anything else to anyone until I get there. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Lisa said. She ended the call and looked around at the scene she had created. Police cars, a crowd of onlookers, phones recording everything, and the state's Attorney General standing calmly in the middle of it all, reviewing files for what was probably an important civil rights case. Dr. Williams walked over to where she was standing. Up close, she could see the quality of his suit, the expensive watch, the bearing of someone who had spent decades in positions of authority. How had she missed all of these obvious signs? "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, "I'd like you to think about something while we wait for your supervisor. I want you to consider what specifically made my behavior seem suspicious to you. What exactly? Did you see that suggested criminal activity?" Lisa tried to organize her thoughts, but everything that had seemed so clear earlier now felt confused and wrong. "You were discussing case details in public," she said, but even as she said it, she realized how weak it sounded. "I was discussing a case I'm personally overseeing with my lead investigator while waiting for my ride," Dr. Williams replied. "That's part of my job responsibilities. What else?" "You were in a neighborhood where you don't belong," Lisa said, then immediately wished she could take the words back. Dr. Williams nodded slowly. "And how did you determine that I don't belong in this neighborhood? What about my presence here seemed inappropriate to you?" Lisa couldn't answer that question without revealing the assumptions that had guided her thinking. She had seen a well-dressed black man in a predominantly black neighborhood and somehow concluded that he didn't belong there. When she tried to examine that logic, it fell apart completely. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Williams said gently, "I've been fighting these kinds of assumptions my entire career. I've been questioned by police, followed in stores, and treated with suspicion in situations where my white colleagues would never face the same scrutiny. I had hoped that younger people in law enforcement might approach these situations differently." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes, not just from embarrassment but from the growing realization of how badly she had misjudged the situation and what her assumptions revealed about her own thinking. Her supervisor's car was pulling up to the bus station, and Lisa knew that her career as a prosecutor was probably about to end. But worse than that was the understanding that she had become exactly the kind of law enforcement officer she had always thought she was fighting against. District Attorney Michael Patterson stepped out of his car with the grim expression of someone who knew his day was about to get much worse. Lisa had worked under him for 3 years, and she had never seen him look this serious. Behind him came the chief deputy district attorney and another supervisor she recognized but had never worked with directly. Dr. Williams approached the group with the same calm professionalism he had maintained throughout the entire incident. "Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming so quickly. I think we need to have a serious conversation about what happened here today." Patterson shook hands with the Attorney General, his face showing a mixture of respect and deep concern. "Dr. Williams, I can't apologize enough for this situation. I'm still trying to understand exactly what occurred. Perhaps Ms. Chen can explain her reasoning," Dr. Williams suggested, looking over at Lisa with an expression that wasn't angry, but was definitely expectant. Lisa felt every eye in the gathering focused on her. The police officers, her supervisors, Dr. Williams, and the crowd of onlookers who were still recording everything with their phones. She had never felt more exposed or more aware of how badly she had mishandled the situation. "I observed behavior that I believed was suspicious," she began, her voice shaky. Dr. Williams was discussing case details and evidence in a public setting, and when I approached him as a prosecutor, he seemed evasive. Patterson's expression grew more troubled as she spoke. "You approached the Attorney General and accused him of criminal activity based on overhearing a professional phone conversation?" "I didn't know who he was," Lisa said defensively. "He was in a neighborhood where he seemed out of place, and the conversation sounded like witness tampering or criminal coordination." Dr. Williams stepped forward slightly. "Mr. Patterson, I think it would be helpful if Ms. Chen could be more specific about what made me seem out of place in this neighborhood." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lisa knew that everyone was waiting for her to explain her reasoning, but she also knew that any honest explanation would reveal the discriminatory assumptions that had guided her thinking. "He was well-dressed and professional-looking," she said, weakly, which seemed inconsistent with the demographics of the area. The silence that followed was painful. Patterson closed his eyes briefly, as if he was trying to process the implications of what his employee had just said. The police officers exchanged glances that suggested they were uncomfortable with being associated with this situation. Dr. Williams nodded slowly. "So you concluded that a black man in professional attire didn't belong in a predominantly black neighborhood? Is that an accurate summary of your reasoning?" Lisa wanted to deny it, to find some other explanation for her suspicions, but she couldn't. When stripped of all the legal language and professional justifications, that was exactly what she had thought. "I made assumptions," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were wrong," Dr. Williams agreed. "But I'm less concerned with the mistake than I am with the thinking that led to it. This isn't just about one incident at a bus stop. This is about how implicit bias affects law enforcement decisions every day." Patterson looked at Lisa with disappointment that was somehow worse than anger would have been. "Lisa, you've just demonstrated exactly the kind of discriminatory thinking that undermines public trust in our justice system. How many cases have you prosecuted with these same assumptions guiding your decisions?" The question hit Lisa like a physical blow because she knew the answer. She thought about the drug cases she had pursued aggressively, the defendants she had recommended harsh sentences for, the situations where she had seen suspicious behavior that might have looked perfectly normal if the people involved had been white. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I never thought about it before." Dr. Williams opened the manila folder he had been carrying throughout the entire incident. "This case I was reviewing involves prosecutorial misconduct in this county. We've been investigating patterns of discriminatory charging and sentencing recommendations. Today's incident gives me additional insight into how these patterns develop." Lisa felt her career crashing down around her. Not only had she falsely accused the Attorney General, but she had done it while he was investigating the very kind of behavior she had just demonstrated. "Dr. Williams," Patterson said carefully, "what would you like us to do about this situation?" "I'd like Ms. Chen to participate in a comprehensive review of her cases," Dr. Williams replied. "I want to see if there are patterns in her prosecutorial decisions that reflect the same assumptions she demonstrated today. And I think she should undergo bias training before handling any more cases." Lisa knew this was probably the best outcome she could hope for, but it still felt devastating. Her professional reputation would be destroyed, Her judgment would be questioned on every future case, and she would be known throughout the legal community as the prosecutor who racially profiled the Attorney General. "There's something else," Dr. Williams continued. "I want Ms. Chen to understand how this incident affected other people, not just her career." He gestured toward the elderly woman who had tried to defend him earlier. She was still standing nearby, and she looked upset and shaken by everything that had happened. "Mrs. Washington has lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, Dr. Williams said. She works as a school crossing guard and volunteers at her church. Today she had to watch a young prosecutor treat a respected member of her community like a criminal for no reason other than racial profiling." Lisa looked at Mrs. Washington and felt a new wave of shame. She had been so focused on her own authority and her own suspicions that she had never considered how her behavior affected the other people who witnessed it. "And the young man who asked if everything was okay," Dr. Williams continued. "He's a construction worker who was heading to his job. He intervened because he's seen this kind of harassment before, and he was trying to protect someone he thought was being treated unfairly." Lisa realized that everyone in that crowd had understood the situation better than she had. They had recognized discriminatory behavior immediately, while she had convinced herself she was conducting a legitimate investigation. Patterson made the decision that Lisa had been dreading. "Lisa, I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full review of this incident and your case history. You'll need to surrender your badge and any case files you're currently handling." As Lisa reached into her purse to retrieve her prosecutor's badge, she thought about her father and the conversations they had shared over the years about law enforcement. She wondered if he had ever made the same kinds of assumptions she had made today, and whether her upbringing in a law enforcement family had contributed to her discriminatory thinking. Dr. Williams seemed to read her thoughts. "Ms. Chen, this isn't just about you. This is about systemic problems in how we train and supervise prosecutors. Your supervisors bear some responsibility for not recognizing and addressing these issues earlier." Patterson nodded grimly. "We'll be conducting a comprehensive review of our hiring, training, and supervision practices. This incident has revealed serious problems that go beyond one prosecutor's actions." As the crowd began to disperse and the police officers prepared to leave, Dr. Williams approached Lisa one final time. "I hope you'll use this experience to become a better prosecutor," he said quietly. "Understanding your own biases is the first step toward ensuring that justice is truly blind." Lisa watched him walk away toward a black sedan that had just pulled up to the curb. His driver got out and opened the door for him, and Lisa realized that this was probably what he had been waiting for when she first noticed him at the bus stop. Over the following weeks, Lisa's story became a case study in prosecutorial bias and the need for better training and oversight. Videos of the incident went viral on social media, sparking national discussions about racial profiling in law enforcement. Lisa eventually participated in the review of her cases, which revealed several instances where her recommendations had been harsher for black defendants than for white defendants with similar charges and criminal histories. She completed extensive bias training and underwent psychological counseling to understand how her upbringing and environment had shaped her thinking. 6 months later, she was allowed to return to work, but in a reduced capacity and under close supervision. Her father, Deputy Sheriff Robert Chen, also underwent bias training after the incident prompted a review of his own cases and arrest patterns. The most difficult part for Lisa was accepting that she had become the kind of law enforcement officer she had always thought she was fighting against. But that acceptance also became the foundation for her growth as both a prosecutor and a person. She learned to question her assumptions, to examine her motivations, and to consider how her actions affected not just her cases, but the communities she was supposed to serve. Dr. Williams' civil rights investigation eventually led to significant reforms in the district attorney's office, including new hiring practices, mandatory bias training, and improved oversight of prosecutorial decisions. The incident at the bus stop became a catalyst for broader changes in how the justice system addressed discriminatory practices. For Lisa, the humiliation of that morning at the bus station became the beginning of a different kind of career in law enforcement. She never forgot the lesson that justice requires not just knowledge of the law, but honest examination of the assumptions and biases that shape how that law is applied.